Dodgers legend Sandy Koufax once said that pitching is the art of instilling fear. That is true. Some of the best pitchers ever to take the mound have also been the best at scaring the hell out of any batter who stepped in against them. And there's not much more horrifying in sports than an intimidating pitcher with elite stuff, as at times it seems like there's an equal chance they could strike you out or just outright put you into an eternal slumber with one wild pitch. What's it like to face some of these guys? Someone once said of another Dodgers ace, the imposing Don Drysdale, that he would consider an intentional walk a waste of 3 pitches. If he wants to put you on base, he can hit you with 1. Slugger Oscar Gamble once said that a good game against the fearsome Nolan Ryan was going 0 for 4 and not getting hit in the head. Hank Aaron, one of the best hitters of all time, didn't mix words about what it was like to square off against the intimidating Bob Gibson. Don't stare at him, don't smile at him, don't talk to him, Aaron said. He doesn't like it. You don't dig in against Bob Gibson, he'll knock you down. He'd knock down his own grandmother if she dared to challenge him. And with that cold as heck line, we're brought to our topic of today, examining some of the scariest pitchers in baseball history. So step right up, but don't get too comfortable in that box. Pitcher number 1, Randy Johnson. Let's start with the towering and glowering Johnson. What made the big unit so intimidating? Let's start with the big part. Few hurlers have ever stood out so much on a baseball mound as Johnson. When the 6'10" southpaw debuted with the Montreal Expos in 1988, he became the tallest player in Major League history at the time. But it wasn't just his height that made his presence on the mound so intimidating. It was the scowl, the brooding countenance, the acne scars, the mustache, and yes, the iconic mullet. And Johnson wasn't just physically imposing, he was also bringing it. Johnson's triple-digit fastball seemed even faster than it was because of how long his stride to the plate was. It could at times feel like he was just handing the ball to the catcher. Add to that a filthy, exploding slider and a nearly sidearm delivery, and the lengthy lefty appeared almost unhittable most of the time. You know what else was so intimidating? His sometimes total lack of control. In his first season with the Expos, he walked as many men as he struck out, and he continued to have major control issues in his first few seasons with the Seattle Mariners. Young Randy was wild, erratic, inconsistent, and all the more imposing as a result. Teammates refused to stand in against him in bullpen sessions. A department store mannequin had to be added to the payroll in their place. Johnson at times also had trouble controlling something else, his temper. When things weren't going well on the mound for the big left-hander, it was wise to give him a wide berth in the dugout and let him take out his rage on other things, like bat racks and water coolers. And even once Johnson learned to control his pitches better later in his career, the looming possibility that he could lose control at any moment hung over the batter's box like a dark cloud, terrifying hitters. If Johnson let go of a fastball over your head, as he did to John Kruk at the 1993 All-Star Game, it didn't really matter if it was intentional or accidental. He was in your head, and the at-bat was pretty much over. Kruk, for one, didn't stand a chance after his intimidation. Johnson's total dominance and intimidating presence became almost laughable at times, as when his former Expos teammate Larry Walker encountered his own John Kruk moment at the 1997 All-Star Game, and promptly turned his helmet around and marched to the other batter's box. What could you do in the face of such an imposing threat but try to laugh? What could you do when Johnson's fastball even proved lethal, as they did when a poor dove chose to fly in front of home plate during 2001 spring training game? Johnson managed to stretch his imposing career over 22 seasons, striking fear into the hearts of hitters en route to 303 career victories and 4,875 strikeouts. Few pitchers have reigned over the game for so long, and until they were as old as the big unit was when he finally hung up his cleats. Pitcher number 2, Bob Gibson. Perhaps no hurler ever stared down batters quite like Bob Gibson. The St. Louis Cardinals ace had a ferocity that only a few like Johnson have ever come close to equaling on the mound. Gibson didn't just glare at hitters, he scowled at them, and the batters didn't just respect him, they outright feared him. That's because Gibson had a bite every bit as menacing as his bark. When he wound up, the 6'2" right-hander swung his entire body around before exploding at the batter and ending in his distinctive follow-through, hurling fastballs that would more than likely register in the mid-90s today. And what's more, hitters knew that it was just as likely to go at their head as paint the outside corner. Gibson brought an intense competitive fire to the mound every time he pitched. He had joined the Cardinals just a decade after Jackie Robinson broke the color barrier, and there was still very few black pitchers in the big leagues. As Gibson put it himself, failure wasn't an option. Gibson's fire-fueled performances that led him to dominate the National League for a decade. The 60s were a hurler's paradise thanks to the high pitching mounds and cavernous fields, and no one leveraged the advantage better than Gibson. It was a time when pitchers owned the inside part of the plate, considered it their personal property. In his autobiography, Gibson said that he threw 9 different pitches after all. 2 different fastballs, 2 sliders, a curve, a changeup, knockdown, brushback, and hit batsmen. Ouch. But Gibson's reputation for throwing at batters belied the amount he actually did it. He never led the league in HBPs and struck only 102 batters in his 17-year career, about 6 per season. Clearly the ones he did hit made an impression, and the legend just grew and grew. Batters often said that Gibson may not have actually hit that many, but he would constantly knock them down intentionally. Gibson later called that ridiculous. He said, "If I threw at a batter, I hit him." Part of Gibson's ferocious mystique came from his utter unwillingness to engage with the enemy. He never shook hands with an opponent, never fraternized. Hell, he wouldn't say a word to his own teammates on days he pitched. He was tough as nails and would never show any weakness. Once, in 1967, Pirates slugger Roberto Clemente lined a pitch back at Gibson. It broke his fibula. Gibson stayed in the game long enough to pitch to 3 more Pirates hitters. Bob's competitiveness helped him win 251 games and 2 Cy Youngs while striking out 3,117. In 1968, he won the National League MVP when he finished with a mind-boggling 1.12 ERA, the modern record. In 9 career World Series starts, he threw 8 complete games, including a 10-inning victory over the New York Yankees. It simply wasn't fair to be that intimidating and that good. When Major League Baseball lowered the mound in 1969 and reduced the height of the strike zone from a batter's armpit to the jersey letters, the changes were known simply as the Gibson rules. Though small in stature at just 5'11" and 170 pounds, Pedro Martinez became one of the most imposing power pitchers in the history of the game. With 3 world-class pitches, a tailing high 90s fastball, a wicked curve, and a nasty change, Martinez could practically toy with hitters. And beyond his 3 stellar offerings, Martinez also enjoyed elite control, command, and confidence. His willingness to come inside could also leave opposing hitters often tasting dirt. And make no mistake, despite his elite movement, this was purely intentional. "I'm not afraid of hitting anyone," he once said, "because I can put the ball where I want to." And sometimes where he wanted to put it was in your ear. In his first few years in the big leagues in Montreal, Martinez earned the reputation as a headhunter. They called him Senior Plunk. Pedro had a knack for hitting batters during tension-filled moments as well, touching off countless bench-clearing brawls. The rail-thin right-hander was sometimes downright proud of this intimidating tactic. After Yankees ace Roger Clemens once drilled his Red Sox teammate Kevin Millar, Martinez, watching from the dugout, said he was going to, quote, "file that at the top of his to-do list." What exactly was this new item on his list? Plunking both Derek Jeter and Alfonso Soriano in response the next time he faced them. Both players had to leave early to have x-rays taken. Martinez joked to teammates, "At least I gave them a discount in an ambulance. They both got to go in the same one." That's one of the coldest lines I've ever heard. At times, Senior Plunk's competitive fire got the best of him, like in the 2003 ALCS. After Martinez threw behind Yankees outfielder Kareem Garcia, Roger Clemens retaliated by throwing at Red Sox slugger Manny Ramirez. When the benches cleared, the 32-year-old Martinez grabbed the Yankees' 72-year-old bench coach Don Zimmer in a baseball takedown that would live in infamy. Martinez later called it the only thing he would like to erase from his career. But with a repertoire that included such dazzling stuff as well as his cutthroat intimidation, it is little wonder that the Dominican pitcher won 219 games and 3 Cy Youngs over his 18 seasons, putting up over 3,000 Ks while pitching predominantly in an era in which oversized sluggers like Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds, and Sammy Sosa were dominating baseball. To some, his prime years in the 90s are even considered the best in the history of baseball. Pitcher number 4, Sandy Koufax. Pedro Martinez's total dominance over his rivals was often compared to Sandy Koufax's reign over the National League during the 60s. For 6 years, the left-handed Los Angeles Dodger pitched like a man possessed, or from another planet, making big league hitters look like minor leaguers. Koufax was so dominant that the Phillies once called a game for rain where there were only a few sprinkles, just to avoid facing him. Hall of Famer Orlando Cepeda said that Koufax's triple-digit fastball was so fast and so noisy it scared you. And just like our other imposing left-hander, Randy Johnson, Koufax struggled to control it early in his career. In his first 6 seasons with the Dodgers, Koufax walked over 5 batters per 9 4 times, and constantly threw wild pitches. He hit so many batters one spring training that one teammate complained taking batting practice against him was like playing Russian roulette with 5 bullets. But Koufax's blazing fastball wasn't even his best pitch. After all, his devastating curveball was undoubtedly among the best offerings ever thrown. We don't tend to think of curveballs as intimidating, but in Koufax's case, it was perhaps even more paralyzing to batters than his heater. It had a sharp, sudden break, as if an invisible hand had given it a tap right before home plate. Even the best hitters were left stunned in silence as it left them frozen in the box. In Game 1 of the 1963 World Series, Koufax faced no less than the Yankee slugger Mickey Mantle. The book on Mantle was to avoid throwing curveballs anywhere near the plate. Even if he was fooled, he was so strong and so good at keeping his hands back that he could still crush them. And so, in his first showdown against Mantle, Koufax threw him only fastballs and struck him out. When Mantle came up a second time, Koufax again got 2 strikes on fastballs. At this point, everyone in the ballpark, including Mantle and Koufax's catcher, was thinking fastball. Koufax shook off the fastball signal twice, and then he uncorked the pitch that he'd been told never to throw Mantle. The pitch came in at eye level, and then right before it reached home, it just dove, crossing at Mantle's knees.
Mantle faces Koufax in the second inning and is called out on strike. Mickey obviously is chagrined.
Mantle flinched and never moved his bat. Strike 3. Mantle just stood there and then turned to the catcher and said, "How the bleep is anybody supposed to hit that bleep?" Stories like that just surround Koufax. Once when he was 45 years old and had been retired for years, he was pitching batting practice to the legendary Dodger lineup of the 1980s, including the likes of Dusty Baker, Steve Garvey, and Ron Cey. One of the hitters asked the old man to throw his curveball. Koufax indulged him. The curve dropped like a stone through water. He couldn't touch it. He told his laughing teammates that they should try hitting it. And one after another, some of the best hitters in baseball, who know a curveball is coming, stepped up to the plate against the 45-year-old. Not a one of them could hit it. Koufax sadly retired after the 1966 season at just age 30 after battling constant pain and injuries, including an arthritic elbow. One marvels at the stats he could have put up if he had played longer. Hall of Famer Hank Aaron would go on to say that the best thing about Koufax's retirement was that he no longer had to face him. Pitcher number 5, Nolan Ryan. There's never been a pitcher quite like Nolan Ryan. With his high leg kick and insane stride length, Ryan felt like he was right on top of opposing hitters before he even let go of the pitch, making his eventual 100-mile-per-hour plus fastball look even faster than it was. As a result, he was absolutely horrifying to face. Thanks to that fastball and his sick curve, he struck out more batters than any hurler ever has, and probably ever will. He threw more no-hitters, pitched more innings, threw more pitches, and through all of it, Ryan never gave in to a hitter, never took a pitch off. Even down to the count, he was still trying to throw unhittable pitches. He wanted to strike out every batter he faced and make them look bad in doing it. Legendary pitching coach Dave Duncan once said, "A guy like Ryan doesn't just get you out, he embarrasses you." Thanks to his ferocity, the typical Nolan Ryan game featured a lot of strikeouts, a lot of walks, and very few hits. Ryan not only struck out the most hitters ever, he walked the most, 2,795 in his career, more than 50% more than Steve Carlton, the next player on the list. The Ryan Express also threw the most wild pitches and hit 158 batters during his career. His lack of control, as evidenced by the fact that he walked more than 100 batters in a season 11 times, only served to intimidate hitters more. And when Ryan was truly on, batters had pretty much no chance. Once, when Ryan was 1 out from one of his 7 no-hitters, Detroit Tigers slugger Norm Cash walked up to the plate, not with a bat, but with the wooden table leg that had been ripped off a table in the Tiger clubhouse. "Check his bat," Ryan shouted from the mound at the home plate umpire, who, after a good laugh, asked Cash to grab a real bat. Cash responded, "Why? I'm not going to get hit anyway." And he didn't. Cash got a real bat, popped up, and Ryan had his no-hitter. Perhaps Ryan's single most intimidating moment came right at the tail end of his career. It was a hot August day in Texas in 1993. Robin Ventura, the White Sox 26-year-old all-star third baseman, strode to the plate against the 46-year-old Ryan. He'd already singled against Ryan in the game. Nolan brought the heat up and in, beating young Robin. Ventura dropped his bat, tossed his helmet, and charged the mound. Big mistake. Ryan hog-tied the young whippersnapper and hammered him with a volley of punches to the head, what was later called the Texas haircut. The whole ordeal made it clear yet again that there are at least 2 things you don't mess with: Texas and Nolan Ryan. Pitcher number 6, Aroldis Chapman. He's been called the Cuban Missile, the Sultan of Swift, the Viceroy of Velocity. He is officially the hardest throwing pitcher ever. Aroldis Chapman, at 6'6", is one menacing presence on the mound. And when you throw in some control issues, as well as a suspension for abuse he incurred back in 2016, you really do have a bona fide boogeyman. Chapman's left arm was blessed by the gods. He and it burst onto the scene with the Cincinnati Reds in 2010, and since then, Chapman has been one of the most electric and erratic closers in the big leagues. Did I mention he was once clocked at 105.1 miles per hour in one of his first big league games? Yeah, on September 24th, 2010, this happened. The pitch was the fastest ever recorded in MLB history, and it almost beat Andrew McCutchen. Chapman later hit 105 again with the Yankees in 2016. Pitches like that don't need a PR team. They're pretty much unhittable and can't help but intimidate batters, even the best in the world. So, what's it like to see a 105-mile-per-hour fastball? Slugger Andrew McCutchen said that trying to hit Chapman's fastball is like trying to catch a fly, not a fly ball, an insect, like Mr. Miyagi. As with Randy Johnson and Sandy Koufax, facing Chapman is even more of a nightmare for lefties. When once asked what it was like to face Chapman from the left-handed batter's box, Matt Carpenter said, "Scary, just scary. He coils up like a snake and he throws 100 miles an hour. And it just seems like it's going to be right by your face." And it might be. And in case anyone ever forgot what he's capable of, Chapman's got it tattooed on his left wrist, where 105.1 miles per hour is inked below a flame-tailed fastball. And for those of you going to comment that he's washed up today, his up to 104 mile per hour heaters this year might just make you want to rethink those statements. Lastly, no list of intimidating heroes would be complete without a few honorable mentions. First up, Sam McDowell. The 6'5" left-hander had a devastating fastball and lived hard and fast, both on the field and off. On the hill, he claimed 5 straight strikeout titles from 1965 to 1970, twice topping 300 Ks. Off the field, he described himself as the biggest, most hopeless, and most violent drunk in baseball. This erraticness, along with his legendary heat and sometimes suspect command, combined to make him one of the most feared fireballers in the game's history. During the late 70s, Astros ace J.R. Richard was one of the most dominant pitchers in the majors. Not only was Richard 6'8" and 220 pounds, looking more like a center than a pitcher, he could throw his fastball over 100 and his slider in the mid-90s, at a time when this was extremely rare. Like Nolan Ryan, he believed in letting it fly all the time, with little regard to where it was going. He also had something of a reputation as a headhunter. Unfortunately, his career was cut short by a stroke in 1980, just as he was really coming into his own, but nonetheless, he left behind a hell of a legacy, especially in the minds of the hitters he faced at the time. Nicknamed the Mad Hungarian for his madman appearance and on-the-mound persona, Al Hrabosky turned batter intimidation into performance art during his 12 major league seasons. He would jaw with umpires, hitters, including those on deck, and could be counted on for a good beanball ensuing brawl at least a couple times per season. And finally, the Rocket, Roger Clemens. With over 4,000 career Ks and 300 wins, while spending a decent portion of his career pumped up on roids, his reputation really did precede him. Aside from his thick body and menacing stare, Clemens was a master of intimidation in his actions as well. Who can forget this moment from the 2000 World Series? Not content to just shatter Mike Piazza's bat with an inside heater, Clemens picked up the barrel and fired it at the Mets catcher. Somehow he wasn't ejected from the game. Maybe even that day's umpire was too scared to take him on. So what have we learned from baseball's most fearsome pitchers about how to intimidate hitters? First, it helps to have a dynamite fastball. It's sometimes better if it's not at all clear where it's going. At times, it's even more scary if you know where it's going and that presumed destination is at you. Sometimes a filthy off-speed pitch can be equally daunting, or a simulated psychotic episode, or hey, how about a real one? All these combine to give us our formula for how to be an intimidating pitcher in the annals of baseball history. Thanks for watching this video, and coming soon, the scariest hitters in baseball history. Please leave a comment below telling us who you'd like to see featured in that video. Finally, leave a like if you enjoyed, and make sure to click this playlist for other essay videos just like this one. Have a great day, everyone.